Hi guys! So I haven't sat down in front of the camera in a really long time. I pre-recorded a bunch of videos back in kind of early May in anticipation of going to Ireland for a month from the end of May to the end of June, and it's now mid-July, so I'm a little bit out of practice. So I thought what I would do is to kind of get me back into the flow of making videos again and sitting in front of the camera. I thought what I would do is just kind of have a bit of a chattier video that I haven't really planned or thought through. Just kind of riffing on a topic that I've been thinking about that has been really relevant for me over the past couple of weeks, like 3 weeks since I got back, particularly since I got back to Edinburgh. And what I've been thinking about a lot recently is the question of who I talk to about my spirituality, who I feel comfortable opening up with about that, and the importance for me of having those people in my life with whom I can be completely open and completely transparent and have those really transformative experiences of sharing those big picture ideas with them. So I wouldn't say that I think that everyone needs to be able to talk to everyone in their life about their spirituality, about their religion, about these kind of big picture things, about those kind of core ideals, core ideas, core beliefs that you hold that just kind of are at the center of who you are. I don't think we need to be able to talk to everyone in our lives about that. I know that sometimes that can make us feel a bit like we're being a bit disingenuous, like we're hiding ourselves away, and there can often be this kind of feeling like we need to kind of come out of the broom closet, so to speak, and that everyone kind of needs to know about our spirituality or our religion, especially when we're in those kind of early stages of figuring out where we fit and our labels and what we believe and what our practice is and so on, what communities we're in. I would say that I don't feel that's necessary at all, and the older I get, the more I feel like I'm perfectly happy for people to gather whatever they have about me and my beliefs and to take whatever they take at face value. If we're not in a kind of close relationship where it's normal and natural for us to end up talking about this stuff. And I would even say that I don't feel like all of my close friends need to completely understand my core beliefs, my spirituality, my practice, what it feels like, what it looks like, just all my experiences with it. I don't need to have those kind of theological, philosophical conversations with all of my close friends. There are definitely close friends that I have that we have other things in common, and while they will have a working idea, like I would say that all of my close friends have a rough idea of what I believe, they have a rough idea of what labels are involved, that I'm a pantheist, that I've got a kind of pagan practice, and so on, and kind of roughly what my interests are. But they're not necessarily going to have ever had a conversation with me about that stuff if they're not interested themselves, because not all of my close friends are overtly interested, well, not from a personal standpoint anyway, they're not overtly interested in being religious or spiritual. It's not something that is central to their identity, to who they are, and to what they think about on a day-to-day basis. So we have other things in common, we talk about other things, sometimes we talk about religion, but not from a personal perspective for all of my kind of religious studies friends with whom I don't have those conversations. And you know, that's completely fine. I think for a while I had a few years where I felt like those kind of close friendships were disingenuous. Like I felt like if I wasn't opening up to people about those kind of deep and important inner parts of me, and you know, able to have these kind of deep and wild conversations about the nature of the universe and God and everything, that there was something missing in our friendship and that I wasn't being as open and honest as I should be with a close friend. But I think recently I've kind of come to terms with that. I've come to terms with the fact that I have really very few close friends actually with whom I can comfortably have those conversations, fewer than I would like, but that's okay, because it just makes them all the more precious when I do stumble on them in person. And this is another reason why, or the main reason why the online community is so valuable for me, and I know this is why for a lot of you it's so valuable too, that we have each other with whom we can have conversations. We have this dialogue online, and that can fill in a lot of the holes. But all of that being said, I'm also really, really valuing right now the people in my life with whom I can have those conversations, and I'm really starting to see the importance for me in my life of being comfortable being vulnerable about my spirituality. And this is not something that I'm particularly good at in person. It's not something that traditionally I have been able to do very easily, partly because I was figuring it out for a long time and partly because I just hadn't been meeting people who were actually interested. And it's not really something you can foist on somebody if they're not that interested. They kind of have to care about the same big picture questions, you know, about like if the core of your belief system or your practice is about, you know, what is the nature of the universe, how does it work, what is the nature of God, what do we mean when we say God, how do I feel about that, why do I have faith, why do I have a practice, why do I not just believe that it's all just, you know, it's all just a kind of mechanistic process, etc., etc. You know, you kind of have to be on the same page to some degree about caring about those things in order to have those conversations. And, you know, it's tricky. But yeah, very recently I started to kind of, in my mind, figure out like that these are the friendships that I have that are great and wonderful and I love them, and those are wonderful, like loving friendships, but these are not friendships in which I have these conversations, and that's okay. I can stop putting pressure on myself and telling myself that I should be having these conversations if I'm going to bring our friendship to the next level. But then also noticing more the friendships I have where those conversations do sometimes happen, and trying to cultivate them more, trying to make space in my life for them more, and also crucially making space in my life for more of those friendships, following them up, you know, like when I feel that happening, when I see that happening for me, following it up, and whatever way that has to happen, just, yeah, kind of acknowledging that it's a big deal when I find somebody, when I meet somebody who I can actually have those kind of conversations with, where I feel comfortable enough to be spiritually vulnerable, and where I can actually have an engaging dialogue, a back and forth, where we both can feel seen and understood to some degree. And here's another crucial part of what I'm kind of trying to get at in this video. That doesn't mean that our beliefs have to line up. And this is another big thing that I've been realizing recently, and I think it's going to have a huge impact on my understanding of who I can and can't have these kinds of relationships with, like who I can and can't have these kind of conversations with, and where I can and can't get this experience from. Because I think that while I was telling myself that I should be able to be open and sharing about my spirituality and my spiritual experiences, my kind of inner spiritual experiences with all of my close friends, while I was kind of putting that weird pressure on myself, I think I was also assuming that I could only have a real true bond with somebody over spirituality and a real true understanding, and to have them really understand me, if our beliefs were very similar. And if we could actually relate and say, oh yeah, I believe the same thing, I totally see it the same way, I totally agree. And it's only been relatively recently, over the past couple of months, that I've been branching out a bit, out of my usual circle. I've been spending time with people who have different beliefs than I do in various different ways, whether it's religious beliefs or political beliefs and so on. And I've been kind of testing those boundaries and how comfortable I am engaging with people who have those kind of different beliefs and worldviews to me, and trying to figure out like to what extent we can actually have a really kind of constructive conversation, and to what extent we can see each other, and actually to what extent, you know, you can have those kind of mind-blowing conversations where your minds meet and you have this amazing feeling of, like I say, vulnerability and connection and dialogue. I'm really starting to realise that those moments and those experiences are absolutely not contingent on you having the same beliefs and coming from the same perspective. And if anything, it can actually be really valuable and sometimes more challenging and more exciting to have those kind of conversations with people who don't have the same beliefs as you, because it challenges you to see your own beliefs from a different perspective, because in order to make them comprehensible for the other person, you kind of have to imagine to yourself, well, how can I explain this in a way that's going to make sense to them? And then at the same time, if they're going to share things back to you, you have to kind of stand in a place of non-judgment and be ready and willing to hear what they have to say, without kind of being in a space of skepticism or being too kind of reactionary about the things that they believe in. I mean, obviously there are lines that we will draw. There are lines that I draw around certain types of beliefs that I just cannot get on board with, that I cannot respect. And unfortunately sometimes that happens, and then I can't cultivate a friendship with that person. But there are an awful lot of beliefs that are very different to mine that I have no innate problem with, that like on a basic level, that those fundamental core beliefs I have no problem with. They're very different to mine, but that they don't indicate to me that there's anything kind of fundamentally amiss with that person's values, if that makes sense. And that to me is the important thing. And I think sometimes when we do look outside the box in that way and actually have conversations that we might ordinarily shy away from, we do start to get a better idea of what our core values are. And that's been my experience anyway, that those kind of like interfaith dialogues or interreligious or interpolitical dialogues can actually give you a much better understanding of, yeah, where your core values lie. And sometimes you find that they actually match up with the other person's, even if the sort of the conclusions that you've drawn and the directions that you've gone based on those core values have gone in different directions. Sometimes there is really this common ground, and that's really where you can connect. And especially just coming specifically to kind of spiritual and religious experiences, that's really where the overlap can happen as well, that sometimes there's a very similar feeling or experience going on at the root of your spiritual or religious experience. And I mean, this is at the heart of kind of universalist understandings of religion. And I feel like, I mean, there are a lot of Christians who have a universalist understanding of religion, and to their minds, because their truth is, you know, the Christian God and Jesus and all of that. So from their mind, it's like, we believe that other people can be finding Jesus through other means, they just don't know it, which kind of, that kind of thinking kind of makes me kind of bristle. You know, I have a kind of automatic kind of defensive reaction to that, but then sometimes I have to step back from that again and kind of go, okay, the reason that they're seeing it that way is because this is their truth to them, and it's so hard for us to step outside of those core truths for us, of what we take to be completely and utterly true and just what we believe in. And sometimes we don't even see the extent to which we're taking certain beliefs for granted. I know I do that too. So my version of that is just like, oh well, you know, everyone's spiritual or religious practices can be completely valid, and in my mind, you know, God or divinity or goddess is something much more ephemeral, and therefore it doesn't make any sense to me that any specific practice or tradition could be more correct than another. But of course, for me to say that to somebody with a very specific traditional religion, that actually can be kind of make them like uncomfortable too. So it kind of goes both ways, if you see what I mean. So sometimes you kind of have to step back and say, well, you know, at the end of the day, we're saying the same thing here. We're both saying that we believe that everyone's spiritual practice or religion is equally valid. That if people are coming at it from with a certain kind of goal in mind, or well, it can be many different kinds of goals in mind, but especially if we are kind of boiling it down to a slightly essentialized idea of spirituality or religion, where we hold on to a kind of core belief of divinity, of a kind of a real kind of divinity in the universe, and then that religion or spirituality is anything that is attempting to connect to that divinity. Now that's not a definition of religion that most religious studies scholars are happy with, and when I've got my religious studies hat on, it's not something that I adhere to. But personally, speaking personally, just as a spiritual person from my own private life, I would say that's probably actually how I see it. That's how I can relate to other people's experiences. Like, to my mind, the same thing is happening. We are both connecting with something that I can just only call God or goddess. And I veer around the place on what words I use to describe that, to describe divinity, the divinity of cosmos. But yeah, like to me we are experiencing the same thing, and working towards the same thing, and it is the same experience. Now, like, that's not to say that everybody in the world who's doing religion is doing the same thing or having the same experiences. I'm just saying that sometimes I can recognize in another person who has different religious beliefs to me, that they are experiencing something that looks, at least to me, very similar to what I experience. That was a very long-winded way of saying what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that I've been really trying to open myself up to really believing that I can have just as good conversations with people of other religious backgrounds or other kind of worldviews as I can with people who have similar worldviews to me. In fact, sometimes those conversations will actually be better because in other ways we gel together better. In other ways we actually have more similar minds, more similar ways of looking at the universe and looking at the questions of the nature of being, and you know, we have similar philosophical outlooks, or even if we've come to different conclusions, we have a similar way of using our minds to get there. So yeah, it's becoming increasingly important to me to find those friendships wherever I can, and to really respect them when I find them, and to not denigrate a friendship in my mind or a connection in my mind just because like from the outside, or you know, on paper, that it doesn't look like we should match up, or that we should be able to have those kind of conversations. What's most important to me right now in my relationships with other people is just seeking out those people with whom I can be easily vulnerable. And for me, being fully vulnerable means talking about my spirituality, talking about my experience of the divinity of cosmos. And it's not really an easy thing for me to talk to people in person about. But at the same time, it's very, very important. And I think those two things are intertwined. I think the importance of it to me makes it difficult. Like if it's something light and easy to talk about, it might not be as important to you. Do you know what I mean? Like the most important things to us sometimes are what we're most nervous to expose to other people, because they are so integral to who we are, and we're almost kind of afraid that they're going to be dismissed by the other person. And if those things are dismissed by them, then we feel like they're dismissing us at some very core level. So I think it's always a very important part for me in developing any kind of really deep friendship with somebody is in seeing if I'm going to be able to have that kind of vulnerability. And, you know, like I said, accepting that some friendships can still be very, very deep and not necessarily have that component to them. But yeah, that's become a big thing for me right now. And just, I spent a lot of time in my 20s desperately yearning for those kind of conversations that you have with people, usually at about 3 or 4 a.m. and often there's wine involved, and sometimes you might be sitting on a roof, or just in some way in a liminal kind of space, you know, where time just kind of falls away and it's just you and them, and sometimes it just feels like this stillness or calmness just settles on you. Everything becomes very clear and it becomes very easy to share a moment of vulnerability and to open up and to have a meeting of the minds. And I feel like I spent a lot of time in my 20s like really kind of almost desperately chasing those experiences and never managing to actually have them. Certainly not as much as I felt like I did when I was younger. And I think it's just because I've been looking in the wrong places that I've been maybe trying to force that in the wrong friendships with the wrong people, and not allowing it to be cultivated with people where it actually happens organically. And yeah, like maybe just not chasing that up enough with the people that I actually feel comfortable with. Because I think, and this is the thing about being challenged, for me, being challenged is a really important thing for me with the people in my life. I love feeling challenged. I love that dynamic with people. But there's a big difference between being challenged by somebody who is coming at it from a judgmental place, that they're kind of listening to you from a place of skepticism. And there's a difference between feeling challenged in that way And feeling challenged in a way where actually you're being challenged by the fact that the person is actually seeing you and listening to you, and willing to take your perspective on board, and they're giving you something back, and there's actually this interchange and a sharing of views, and that is a different kind of challenge, and in my mind a much more productive, creative kind of challenge. And I think previously I maybe never saw that as being challenging, because often being with those kinds of people doesn't feel challenging to me because it's not difficult. The kinds of people who respect you and respect your perspective and have a very non-judgmental way of interacting with you, often being with them doesn't feel difficult or challenging, or like you're going to get anything, well, in my mind, like you're going to get anything new out of it necessarily, because it's easy. But actually, what I'm starting to learn is I think the best challenges come from interacting with people with whom it is easy to talk to. Which maybe that's self-evident to all of you, maybe this is just some strange perception of mine, but that's been a big eye-opener, that yeah, I think a lot of the time I might have been more dismissive of those kind of friendships, that maybe I would have thought that they lacked depth or something, because it, like I say, they felt too easy. It was too easy to have an easy camaraderie. But yeah, what I've been learning over the last couple of weeks is that those are the exact friendships that once you get yourselves into the right space, you have the time, you just sit back and relax and have a few drinks, then suddenly that can kind of start to flow into something that is a lot more challenging, that actually is productive and creative, and is bringing new ideas into the fore. And there's nothing more challenging, I think, than really having to take on another person's perspective and really engaging with another human being and having that amazing feeling of just connection with another human. I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it? I can't imagine anything more important in this world than really truly feeling like we're connecting to the people around us, and finding people in our lives with whom we can connect in loads of different ways and learn things from, you know? So yeah, I think that's about all that I wanted to say. It's been a bit all over the place, but like I said, I needed a little ease me in kind of video, just get me back into the flow of things, and hopefully I will be getting back to doing videos weekly again. It's been a little bit more interspersed, like since I came back from Ireland things have just been a bit mad, a bit crazy, but yeah, getting back into the flow of things now. And yeah, I hope all of you have been really good. I haven't been replying to comments on videos either, I'm really sorry. I think just the disconnect from not constantly, I had all the videos like pre-uploaded, like scheduled, and I think just the disconnect from not going onto YouTube and uploading them, I just never got round to actually checking comments. But I will be going back and checking those comments and hopefully replying to them. At least I try to reply to questions at the very least, and then I reply to some other comments as well. So yeah, I hope you've all been doing well in the absence of me actually reading what you've been saying to me, and do please comment below with any thoughts, any experiences of your own on this. Don't forget to like the video and to subscribe and hit the bell button so that you always get notified when I post videos. And yeah, take care, and I will talk to you again soon.